articles that I thought were interesting. This is one of the interesting problems that makes what happens when you have history. What's going on, originally there were only 7 top-level domains allowed on the internet, .com, .net, .mil, and a few others. And so companies, Microsoft decided to use DNS on local networks long ago, like 20 years ago. So you had to give your local machines a DNS name. So what you would do when you made your domain controller is you would make a special name that was local. And a lot of people chose names that were not allowed on the public internet at that time, like ending your company in .inc. The problem is, many years later, ICANN changed their mind and they allowed hundreds of new top-level domains. So companies, see, the original thing, you would have your name of like a shared drive would be like this, drive1.internalnetwork.example.com. And you could then refer to it as / drive1, and Microsoft Domain Controller would fill in all the rest of it. That was your default domain name. The problem is you would have a top-level domain like .inc or .llc, and now those are routable domain names on the real internet. So companies' private addresses are now going off to the real internet when they don't change anything, because they changed the internet around them. And so a company that did this, now your local data is going to be sending off to people on the internet. This, by the way, is an old problem called typo squatting. I saw a talk a few years ago by a guy that did this. He would buy Microsoft.com and Cisco.com and stuff and just spell things a little wrong and just sit on them, and tons of email would come to him because people would fill in email addresses and type it wrong. And so he would get gigabytes of corporate email in just a few days sent to that domain by doing this. It's a similar kind of problem, but it just would affect the entire company. So it's an interesting problem because of everything is changing. So there are clues that Microsoft is going to backport the ads onto Windows 10. Very many people hate Windows 11 because Microsoft has now covered the desktop with ads for Microsoft services, and they're going to bring that to Windows 10 also, apparently. So that's something to look forward to for people who still use Windows. And the Mac has got malware that steals password and crypto wallets. They trick you into installing this thing called Cthulhu Sealer. Now this particular one seems to have shut down, but there are others. And anyway, they trick you into installing this stuff, and then it goes to your machine, steals the browser cookies, data from crypto wallets, and so on. So a lot of people that have Macs feel like they're safe from malware, but you're not entirely safe. You're just a whole lot safer than Windows users. Anyway, let me just check. No comments, all right. So here. So I was very interested in this. I used to work under contract of Federal Trade Commission, and Lena Khan, the new leader of the Federal Trade Commission, is trying to do a lot of things, and so far not having much luck getting anything through because it's very hard to regulate tech companies in America. But what she wants to do is ban fake reviews and testimonials. And that might be nice because people just pay for Amazon ads and such, Amazon reviews and such. The problem is, all my life they've had like celebrities endorsing things, football stars endorsing cereal and stuff, and that's totally fake. So I wonder if it's possible to ban this, but it certainly would be nice if they can. We'll see if they can do it. So the Inflation Reduction Act has funded converting coal plants to solar farms. Sounds pretty good to me. Be nice if more of this happens. Of course, it will all depend on the next election because Trump has made it very clear that he is opposed to all anti-warming measures. He doesn't believe there's any greenhouse warming. He says it's a scam from China, and they will multiply fossil fuels and end all like windmills and solar power and stuff. A standard Republican position. So this one is actually very interesting, and it probably affects me and probably everybody else. I use Apple Pay because Apple Pay is much safer than a real credit card, or so I thought. The thing about a normal real credit card is when you perform a transaction, they get your credit card number and they can just keep taking money out of it forever. It's insane. It's like handing out a pack of blank checks to everybody you do business with. So if you use a digital wallet, the Apple Pay wallet is the most secure because it's tied to a hardware secret storage system, which is very secure. And so every time you do a transaction, it creates a unique code that cannot be reused. The problem is they didn't think through the process. And the process goes like this. if you lose your credit card and cancel it, it doesn't know that that's happened. And the merchant doesn't know that's happened because they never get your real credit card number. So they don't know it's a canceled card. So a stolen card, a crook can steal a card and add it to a digital wallet and keep using it even after you cancel it. Because that's the problem. The information is lost. They don't know which card you're using. And they found almost all the banks are vulnerable for this. Attach stolen card into the wallet, authorize a transaction. And when you authorize a transaction, it authorizes by doing biometrics. So if I steal your card and put it in my wallet, all it does is verify my face for my wallet and then assume that gives me the right to use your card. It doesn't have anything connected to your card. So this is pretty serious. And most of the banks, they told, didn't do anything about it or even answer. They found almost all banks were vulnerable to this. And the Bank of America completely ignored the report, and many other banks. Just a couple of them even answered. So they just haven't thought it through. This is the kind of flaw that happens a lot, like password reset systems often have flaws. They have a system that is very secure when used by the authorized user, but they didn't think of all the attack modes. And in fact, it's not incredibly obvious what they can do about this, but what they clearly need to do is somehow verify that you own the card when adding a card to your wallet. And I don't remember any process that did that. And I'm not even sure what it would be, but they would have to do something like that. Anyway, it's a thing to be aware of. Nothing you can do about it as an end user, just hopefully the banks will upgrade their systems at some point. So this is, reminds me of cryptocurrency companies. So Uber collects data from their drivers, which, by the way, they were forced to do. In the early days, Uber did not collect much data from their drivers, and then their drivers started attacking, robbing, and raping people, and then they say, you should have done background checks on your drivers. So they had to collect data and do background checks on their drivers. So now that they do that, let me get this into an archive page so we can see it. All right. Now that they do that, they have to send the data back to a central server, and that's what they did. And now the Dutch regulators want hundreds of millions of dollars to punish them for sending it to an American server saying you violated the general data protection regulation in Holland. The problem is they asked the government what to do and they couldn't get an answer. So they are protesting this, saying, look, we try to obey your law. We can't understand what your law means. We made a best face effort, and now you change your mind and say we should have done something different, but you wouldn't tell us that. And so they may be able to get out of it in court on that. We'll see. This reminds me of the people in Georgia, or Florida, who voted while they were felons out on parole. And they called the election office and asked them, can I vote? And they said, yeah, sure, vote. And then when they voted, they arrested them and locked them up, saying you're not allowed to vote because you're a felon. And it's pretty outrageous when you ask the government and they tell you the wrong thing and then you punish you for doing the wrong thing. Downright rude. Anyway, so the United States, one of the many things they did to black farmers after after the Civil War, they promised all the black farmers 40 acres and a mule long ago. That was part of restitution. They just didn't do it. And now they've actually made a $2 billion payout to them, which is about 1% of what they lost. So this is the beginning of a little bit of restitution for all the farmers that were promised things and just ignored it. We also promised the American Indians lots of things and then just totally ignored it. This is why Hitler imitated America with great interest, saying, how can you have these rules and totally break them and just get away with it? He thought that was extremely interesting and tried to imitate how we did it. It is pretty interesting. And so there's a algorithm that quantum computers can use to break RSA encryption because they can factor compound numbers into their prime factors, and that's called Shor's algorithm. But these guys have made a new algorithm which is a different quantum circuit using a series of Fibonacci numbers. And the trick here is it only uses simple multiplication, which is reversible. Quantum circuits can only do reversible operations. It's sort of a thermodynamic principle. And they've found a new way to calculate exponents using Fibonacci numbers, which is only multiplication and therefore more reversible. So this in principle would make quantum computers even more powerful at cracking RSA numbers. Now still, nobody can crack like a 2048 RSA key with any existing quantum computer that anybody knows about. They will have to get much better than they are, but they are getting better every year, and it is projected in a few decades they will be able to crack RSA encryption. That's why everyone has to start moving off it now, because the data you're encrypting may well become exposed within a few decades, and that's typically not acceptable. Although, to be fair, data at rest is almost never encrypted with RSA. Data at rest would be encrypted with AES, which quantum computers are not going to break. So, however, the data you send over the internet could be broken in a few decades, and there are groups archiving data just for that reason, like the NSA. In a huge center in Utah, they're archiving all the data that gets sent over the internet, hoping to find the key later. And that attack would work. Also, of course, the NSA may well have a working quantum computer. They're typically a few decades ahead of the unclassified world. And in rats, they found a brain pathway that reverses memory loss in Alzheimer's. So, of course, it's a long way from rat experiments to a human treatment, but it does have a new area of treatment, which is good because for the last 2 or 3 decades, Alzheimer's research has all focused on removing the brain plaques, and it turns out that all that was based on fraudulent research, which falsely attributed them to the cause of Alzheimer's, including a drug that just got approved that costs like $50,000 a year and does almost nothing. The scientific fraud problem is quite large, and it deflects whole fields of science into blind alleys when scientists fake their results. And that happened with Alzheimer's research. Anyway, let me